Have you struggled with this problem before? You're trying to say something in a foreign language, but then you realize that you can only say it if you first translate this word from your native language. And yes, sometimes it's so annoying. It takes time and it makes you feel less fluent in a foreign language. And I completely understand why you might want to stop translating in your head and start thinking in this language. So here's how you can do it. First, don't rely on translations. I'm gonna tell you guys something super funny right now. When I was preparing for this video, I read a lot of articles online about how to start thinking in a foreign language. And a lot of those articles were kind of contradicting themselves. The article was called How to Stop Translating. And one of the tips was, oh, it's okay to translate or use translation. I was like, what? I was trying to stop translating, wasn't I? And you're giving me tips and saying that I should be translating. That's kind of strange. In my opinion, when you're learning a foreign language, you should try to rely on pictures as much as possible, especially at the very beginning, when you have to learn a lot of new vocabulary. It's my personal opinion and you don't have to agree with me. However, I'm gonna explain why I think the way I think. For example, let's imagine I have to memorize what we call this thing in English, Spanish, and Chinese. So how am I gonna do it? Of course, I will use Google Translate or a good dictionary to translate this word from my native language, Russian, to English, for example, and then Spanish, and then Chinese. But then when I actually sit down, I open my computer and I create a new flashcard on Anki or Quizlet or any other app you might be using. I don't use this translation. What I do use is a picture of this hairdryer and the word in English, Spanish, and Chinese. Obviously, it's like 3 different cards. So it's gonna be a picture and then the word hairdryer in my English deck. Picture and then el secador for my Spanish deck. And picture and 吹风机 for my Chinese deck. Because when you use translations, even for the simplest words, what happens when you actually speak this language is this. Imagine you're having a conversation with a native speaker and suddenly you start talking about hair dryers. So the first thing your brain does is it goes to the word in your native language. For me, it's fan. This is how we say hair dryer in Russian. And then you're like, oh my god, how do we say fan in English? I don't remember. But in reality, we don't need this connection. We don't need to first think of a hair dryer, then think of a word in our native language, and only then think about how we say this word in a foreign language. We need to bypass the second step. We need to think about the picture and immediately think about the word in a foreign language. And that's exactly why you should not use translations when you're creating flashcards, or try to minimize translations at least. And this method works perfectly for more complicated words too. Of course, sometimes you will need to use this translation, and it's totally fine, as long as it happens sometimes, rarely, not always. Because the goal here is to move away from translation at least for a little bit. 10% less translations is already better than 3% less translations. And I know you guys might be looking for a good translation tool to look up the definitions of different words in a foreign language. And here is where QuillBot can help you a lot. QuillBot is perfect for non-native English speakers because it can help you write and study English more effectively with its various tools. With their translator tool, you can translate text to over 30 different languages. I was reading this article on CNN in Spanish, and then I used QuillBot to translate this text from Spanish to English. You can also use their paraphraser tool to type in the text in English and then make it more understandable. And finally, you can use their grammar checker to check if you made any mistakes in this sentence. Yep, I forgot the letter S here. For your everyday use, it's extremely easy to use QuillBot as a Chrome extension to improve the quality of your writing on the go on Notion, Gmail, Docs, and other platforms. So if you want to give them a try, make sure to use the link in my description. Thanks to the support, I can continue bringing you guys entertaining videos each week. So make sure to give them some love and click the link below. The second thing you should do is memorize new words in context. Context is everything. It's basically a key to how a word can be used. Try not to memorize just words without any context, even if you're trying to memorize simple words. For example, a hairdryer. Try to say, my hairdryer is purple, for example. Try to create a sentence, create context for this word. There is a word in Chinese that I couldn't memorize for a very long time. To lose. 失去. What helped me is creating a sentence that I knew I would be able to memorize easily. Many people lost their jobs during COVID. 许多人在新冠疫情前失去了工作. So because here I have this context, 失去了工作, I know that I can use this verb in Chinese to lose a job, for example. So it makes it easier for me to memorize all this new vocabulary. And of course, it's crucial that when you create sentences, they have to be somehow connected to your life or connected to something that's happening in the world, and especially something you can relate to. For example, this sentence about COVID, for me, it was relatable. I knew I would have no trouble memorizing it, and for me, this type of sentence worked. And because I just told you guys, we're trying to move away from translations, when I was creating a new card in my Anki app, I wasn't creating it like Chinese sentence and then English sentence. No, this is not what I was doing. I saved it like this: one Chinese sentence with a space. And this was like the front of the card for me. The back of the card was the answer, like what I have to actually put in the space, 失去了. Because again, I always try to use as little translation as possible. So now when I open Anki and I see the sentence, I see one Chinese sentence and then the answer in Chinese. No English, no Russian, no Spanish, only Chinese. Number 3. Develop your secondary linguistic personality. We all know that language is closely connected to culture. Learning a new language is like getting this key to, enter this new culture and understand it better. You can say as much as you want that you love the Mexican culture, but if you're not learning Spanish, you're gonna miss out on a lot of things. When I was preparing for this video, I read the scientific article where scientists were conducting research about secondary linguistic personality, and they concluded that every language personality consists of 3 important things. The first thing is the language part, the second is the communicative part, and the third thing is the cultural part. And the culture one is exactly something that shows the greatest difference between different people, between different nationalities. Otherwise, they will not be able to achieve this native-like proficiency in a foreign language. The native speakers will always perceive such a person not simply as a foreigner, but as an alien, not able to communicate culturally adequately. That is, strictly following in communication the existing cultural norms known and observed by everybody, really belonging to the given speech community. So I think that's exactly why so many people always talk about the importance of learning more things about the culture, because otherwise you will just not fit in. And if you think that the perfect grammar or using advanced vocabulary is enough, you're so wrong. What about gestures? What about slang? What about some cultural expressions? All of those cool little expressions that people use in a particular country. I had a class with my Spanish teacher a few weeks ago, and I was telling her how I usually feel very lazy to exercise. And I said, tengo flojera, which means I am lazy in Spanish. And my teacher was like, actually, do you know that here in Mexico, we often use this informal expression when we talk about laziness? And I was like, which one? And the expression is me da hueva. It's like me da flojera, but more informal. And I was like, me da hueva. Interesting. I have not heard this expression before. And obviously slang is a huge representation of this culture. In Mexico especially, people love to use slang. And again, if you want to fit in with this community, you have to learn the culture of this community. Number 4, use AI to your advantage. First, you have to make sure you know the most common words in the language you're learning. I recommend checking Gabrielle Weiner's list of 625 most common words in thematic order. I like his list a lot because there you can find 600 super common words, and what you have to do is just make sure you know how to say all of these words in the language you're learning. For example, Spanish. If you're learning Spanish, you have to be confident that you know how to say all of these words and you can use them effectively. But here is where you can take a step further. You can use ChatGPT to create situations for yourself, and this is something that I do sometimes too. It would be better if you could practice those situations when you're actually speaking the language. However, if you don't have a teacher, if you don't have anyone to speak with, you can also practice writing. So you can use these situations to write in your target language. So let's take the part with the location, for example. So on Gabriel Weiner's list, we see location. We make sure we know all of these words. We can use them confidently. To do that, you can use a spaced repetition system, for example, the app Anki, and then you move on to ChatGPT. You ask ChatGPT to give you sentences or create situations for you that are connected to these words. And here's what we have here. City. Can you tell me about the city you live in? What's it like? And then you have to respond. Obviously, it's absolutely amazing if you could practice all of those questions with your teacher, because this way you will definitely remember how to say the word city, how to describe your city, and then you move on. You move on to house, for example. Could you describe your house to me? What does it look like? Or maybe you live in an apartment, and so on. At the end of the day, just like everything about learning a new foreign language, starting to think in this language is not easy, and it takes a lot of time. Your brain will be often telling you to just stop and switch to your native language because it's too painful. But you have to persevere. Every time I speak Spanish to people, I'm so tempted to switch to English, especially if I know that this person can speak English really well. Why do I even need to try and speak English and sweat and feel anxious if I can just start speaking English and feel super confident? But no, this is how human psychology works. And obviously, we don't like feeling uncomfortable. And when you are learning a foreign language, you will feel uncomfortable pretty often. Remember, practice makes comfort. The more you practice a foreign language, the more comfortable you will feel to make mistakes, to maybe not remember a word and try to describe it with different words. Obviously, it doesn't give you a guarantee that you will always feel 100% comfortable. No, language learning doesn't work this way. When I speak English, there are still moments to this very day when I feel just so uncomfortable and I'm like, let's switch to something else. Let's switch to my native language, to Russian. Давайте уже поговорим на русском, а? But what keeps me going are all of my language goals and all the people that I've met when I started learning this language. And some people rely on me speaking Spanish to them or speaking Chinese because that's the only languages they speak. So that's gonna be it for today's video. Don't forget to use the link below and check out QuillBot. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you in my next video.